The stars outside the viewport shimmered like dust scattered across the dark. The Aegis Eternal, a massive Terran warship, drifted silently toward the edge of known space. Its hull was black and smooth, designed to disappear into the void. No markings, no lights, just a shadow in the sea of stars. Inside the command deck, Commander Jackson Morrow stood with his arms behind his back, his gaze steady. He was a tall man in his early 40s, with sharp eyes and a quiet intensity that made even senior officers stand straighter when he entered a room. His uniform was crisp, his posture calm, but inside he was alert. They were heading into the Black Line, a no-man's land between the Terran Republic and the Veil Syndicate. For over a century, it had been a neutral zone. Neither side dared enter it with warships. The treaties were clear. Violating the boundary could start a war that would burn half the galaxy. But now, research ships from the Terran side had vanished. No distress signals, no wreckage, just silence. High Command had sent him and the Aegis Eternal to find answers, and to make a statement if needed. Morrow turned to his second-in-command, Lieutenant Kayla Ree. "Status?" he asked. She glanced at the screen, crossing into the line now. Stealth field stable. No contacts. The crew worked in silence. This was not a routine mission. Everyone aboard knew it. The Aegis Eternal was not an ordinary ship. It had been kept secret, even from most of the military. Designed in the shadows, armed with experimental systems, it was humanity's last resort, meant to end wars before they began. As the ship moved deeper into the zone, the light from nearby stars faded. The Black Line lived up to its name. Space here felt heavier, like the dark itself was watching. Commander Morrow paced slowly, scanning the data on the main display. Still nothing. No ships, no signals, just the quiet hum of the engines. Then the lights flickered. Power fluctuation. Morrow asked without looking up. Ree shook her head. "No, sir, that was external. Something just passed near us." "Can we see it?" "Not yet. Still cloaked. But it's there." Morrow narrowed his eyes. He knew what it meant. Someone was waiting for them. "Raise shields, quietly. Prepare for contact," he said calmly. The crew moved quickly. Hands flew over consoles. The energy hum of the shield core rose beneath their feet. Too low for the ear, but present if you paid attention. Then it happened. On the screen, dozens of red shapes bloomed into view. Veil ships, decloaking all around them like ghosts out of nowhere. They had been hiding in the dark, waiting. The Veil Black Fleet. Their ships were sleek and curved like living blades, covered in silver armor that shimmered unnaturally. Their engines gave off no heat, no sound, just a faint blue glow, cold as ice. Lieutenant Ree's voice was low. "They've surrounded us." A message came through. The alien language spilled across the screen, symbols and sounds unlike anything human. The ship's translator took a second, then converted it into plain Terran standard. "You have violated the ancient pact. You will lower your shields, power down your weapons, and prepare to be boarded." Silence fell across the bridge. Morrow didn't move. Another message followed immediately. "Failure to comply will be seen as an act of war." Morrow exhaled slowly, then looked out the viewport. All around them, the Veil ships sat like wolves in a ring, teeth bared. The peace was about to break, but not yet. He turned to his crew, his voice steady. "Hold position. Do not respond. Let them wonder what they've really found." The tension in the room thickened. Commander Jackson Morrow stared into the black. This was only the beginning. The Aegis Eternal floated in silence, surrounded by the deadly curve of the Veil Black Fleet. The alien ships didn't move. They hovered in place, forming a tight sphere around the Terran vessel, like a trap that had finally sprung shut. Inside the command deck, Commander Jackson Morrow stood still, eyes fixed on the glowing red outlines on the main display. The Veil had them in a perfect ring. No gaps, no escape. But Aegis Eternal didn't move either. No panic, no alarms. Just silence and the low thrum of the ship's core systems. Lieutenant Kayla Ree studied the console. "They've got weapons powered, sir. Shield signatures suggest heavy plasma and gravitic warheads." multiple dreadnoughts. Morrow didn't flinch. Estimate their strength. Ree looked up. 52 ships, at least 10 capital class. If it comes to a fight, we won't win clean. Morrow nodded slowly. We're not here to win a fight. We're here to end one before it starts. Another message arrived. This time the Val didn't wait for a response. Terran vessel, you are trespassing. This region is protected by pact law. Turn over your command codes and prepare to be boarded. The message repeated, emotionless and cold. The crew glanced at Morrow, waiting for a reaction. Instead, he walked calmly to his chair and sat down, folding his hands together. Open a channel, he said. A moment later, the screen lit up. A face appeared, elongated, pale blue skin, stretched over fine bone, with dark, expressionless eyes. Arch-Admiral Korath Vel, Supreme Commander of the Val Black Fleet. Morrow had seen images of him before, but they didn't capture the strange stillness of his presence. The Val commander looked at him, as if studying a curious insect. You do not belong here, Terran, Korath said. His voice was soft but sharp. Your actions are illegal and dangerous. Do you intend to provoke war? Morrow replied with quiet control. We're here because 3 Terran vessels disappeared in this region. Civilian science crews. No weapons, no signals, no answers. Korath tilted his head. They crossed into forbidden space. The Val protect their borders. They were in neutral territory. There is no neutral anymore, Korath replied. Only territory you pretend does not belong to us. The tension thickened. Commander Morrow leaned forward slightly. We came for answers, not a fight, but I won't let my crew be taken. This ship will not be boarded. Korath's eyes narrowed. You believe your ship can withstand us? He asked. Morrow didn't answer. He let the silence speak. The screen flickered and went dark. The connection cut. Returned. Their locking targeting systems. Around them red indicators blinked across the tactical display. Val ships were preparing to fire. Lieutenant Mikkel Stone, the weapons officer, looked to Morrow. Permission to charge weapons. Morrow shook his head. Not yet. Let them wonder. The crew tensed. Fingers hovered over controls. Eyes fixed on displays. They all knew what the Aegis Eternal could do, but no one had ever seen it in action. Not fully. Not even them. More messages came, but Morrow ignored them. He stared at the enemy ships, watching for weakness, listening for hesitation. Then the lights dimmed again. Something's wrong, Ree whispered. They're trying to jam our systems. Morrow stood. Let them run a silent diagnostic. Confirm we still have full control. A long minute passed. The Val ships edged closer. Sir Ree said quietly. They're preparing boarding pods. They're coming. Morrow's jaw tightened. All decks locked down, he ordered. Activate phase shield grid. Prepare cloak drop. He walked toward the front viewport. The Aegis Eternal still shimmered with its cloaking veil, invisible to the eye. The Val had surrounded a ghost, but soon they would see it. Commander Ree said, should we give them a warning? He shook his head. No, they had their chance. He looked out into the black. Let them see what they've woken. The lights across the command deck of the Aegis Eternal turned from cool white to deep amber. This was not a drill. Every crew member moved with purpose, trained for this moment. But even with all their preparation, there was tension in the air, because no one had ever seen the Aegis Eternal in battle. Commander Jackson Morrow stood tall, silent at the center of it all. The eyes of the bridge were on him. The enemy was closing in. Boarding pods had launched. The Veil were making their move. He took a breath, long and calm, even though the weight on his shoulders was heavier than ever. Outside, the void was alive with motion. Veil ships glided forward in a tightening net. Their engines pulsed with cold blue fire. The boarding pods streaked toward the human ship like glowing darts, aimed for the outer hull. Inside, the crew waited. Pods approaching 20 seconds to contact. Lieutenant Kayla Ree reported. Her voice was steady, but Morrow saw the tightness in her jaw. Lieutenant Mikkel Stone, watching the tactical systems, looked up. They're not bluffing. They mean to take the ship. Morrow nodded once. Then he stepped forward, speaking clearly. Activate phase shield grid. Begin cloak drop sequence. At once the hum of energy changed. Beneath their feet, the ship came alive. Static flickered across the screens. Light outside the hull bent and shimmered. Then the Aegis Eternal appeared. For the first time the Veil saw it. The cloak fell away like a curtain lifting in space. The massive Terran warship came into full view, black and silent, but glowing faintly with an eerie light. It wasn't like any ship the Veil had seen before. It didn't have exposed engines or external weapons pods. Its surface was seamless, covered in defensive layers that adapted in real time. Its shape was strange, long and sharp, like a spear made to pierce through worlds. The Veil ships paused. The boarding pods began to veer off, uncertain. On the command deck, Ree whispered, "They're hesitating." "They should," Morrow replied quietly. "They've never seen what this ship was built for." He turned to the main console. "Release outer core signal. Let them read us." Stone hesitated. "That'll tell them what we're carrying." Morrow met his eyes. "Exactly." With a few keystrokes, a pulse was sent from the ship, an encrypted data wave designed to be intercepted. It was a message without words, a raw data burst broadcasting the power levels of the Aegis Eternal's primary weapons system. Within seconds the Veil received it, and within seconds they understood. On the Veil command ship, Arch-Admiral Korath Veil stared at the numbers. The data showed energy levels that didn't match any known Terran tech. It showed reactor output high enough to power a city-sized fleet. It showed weapon capacity that could burn an entire armada in one salvo. The humans had brought a monster into the dark. Back aboard the Aegis Eternal, the crew watched as the enemy fleet stalled. The boarding pods turned back. Lieutenant Ree confirmed what everyone could see. "They're pulling back, repositioning." Morrow didn't relax. "They're not done yet," he said. "They're trying to understand what we are." He walked toward the viewport, watching the Veil ships shift. "I want every weapons system online, but do not fire. If they shoot, we return fire. Not before." Stone gave a small nod. "Understood." There was a pause. The tension was still thick. The silence in space was deafening. Morrow looked around at his crew. Young officers, experienced engineers, nervous technicians, all of them trained, loyal, ready, but still human, still afraid. "I know this isn't what we signed up for," Morrow said, loud enough for all to hear. "This ship wasn't built to start wars. It was built to stop them. Right now, that's what we're doing. If we stay calm, stay smart, and stand our ground, we won't need to fire a shot." He let his words sink in. "But if they come at us again, I want them to regret it." Outside, the Veil fleet held its position. The standoff stretched. Both sides waited. Commander Morrow returned to his chair. His fingers tapped once on the armrest. "Maintain position," he said. "Let them decide what happens next." The darkness outside felt even deeper now, but the Aegis Eternal did not flinch. It stood in the heart of enemy space, visible, powerful, and completely unshaken. The Black Line was silent. The Veil fleet no longer advanced, but they didn't retreat either. They hovered in the dark like a storm held just outside a fragile wall. Inside the Aegis Eternal, tension filled every corner of the ship, but Commander Jackson Morrow remained calm. He stood before the main viewport, eyes locked on the enemy ships. His face showed no fear, only thought. The cloak had been dropped. The Aegis Eternal was exposed. But it wasn't weak. It was a message, a challenge, a warning. Lieutenant Kayla Ree looked up from her console. "They're scanning us, multiple times. They're trying to figure out what our systems are." "They won't," Morrow said. "This ship was built to confuse them." It was true. The Aegis Eternal's internal architecture didn't match anything in known Terran ship design. It used tech that hadn't been officially announced. Power signatures that mimicked ancient weapons, but ran on silent, adaptive cores. A ship meant to survive, meant to scare. Morrow turned to Lieutenant Michael Stone. "Weapons status." "Fully charged," Stone replied. "Plasma array and gravitic rails on standby. Shield grid stable. Hypercore at 97%. Morrow nodded. "Prepare for warning shot. Choose their nearest ship, but aim to miss. Close enough to rattle them." The crew stiffened. "Sir," Stone asked. They need to know we're not just another warship, Morrow said. They need to feel it. Stone turned back to his console and entered the coordinates. The target, a Val cruiser just outside the forward arc. Locked in, he said. Morrow gave a single word, fire. The hum of power built for less than a second, and then the Aegis Eternal spoke. A single bolt of white-blue plasma tore through the void. It didn't hit the Val ship. It didn't need to. The bolt passed just meters in front of the cruiser's nose, flashing with the force of a small sun. The energy wave rippled outward, crashing against the enemy's shields and making them flare. The Val fleet recoiled. Onboard sensors lit up with activity. Val ships broke formation. Some began pulling back. Others froze in place. Panic spread through their ranks like a virus. On the command deck, no one spoke for a moment. Then Ree said quietly, "They're scared." Morrow nodded. Good, but his eyes stayed sharp. He knew fear was dangerous. It could cause retreat, or it could trigger a desperate attack. A message came through again, but this time it was different. Human commander, your actions have violated treaty law. But your ship, we did not expect such technology. What is your purpose here? It was no longer a demand. It was a question. A sign of uncertainty, of doubt. Morrow opened the channel himself. His voice was calm and direct. I already told you. We came to find our missing ships. We found your fleet instead. The reply came after a pause. They crossed into our territory. They were dealt with. Morrow's jaw tightened, but he didn't react with anger. You destroyed unarmed science vessels. They were spies. No, Morrow said. Firm now. They were explorers. You killed them. And now you've surrounded my ship. You threatened my crew. Another pause. What happens now, human? Morrow looked into the black, into the eyes of a fleet that had finally seen what the Terran Republic could do. That depends on you, he said. If you fire again, we will defend ourselves. But if you leave now, we won't chase. This ends here. For long seconds, there was no reply. Then the enemy fleet began to move. The Val ships pulled back slowly, their formation unraveling. First the outer cruisers, then the larger command ships. One by one they reversed engines and faded into the dark. The boarding pods turned away. The standoff was ending, but not because of diplomacy, because of fear. On the command deck, Morrow watched them disappear. Stone exhaled. They're really going. Ree nodded. No one fired a shot. Except us. Morrow didn't smile, but there was a quiet satisfaction in his eyes. We showed them enough, he said. Let them think about what they almost started. He turned back toward the center of the room. Stay alert. This could still turn. But for now, we hold. The crew returned to their stations. The tension didn't vanish completely, but the weight had shifted. The danger was pulling away. The storm had passed barely. The Aegis Eternal remained still in the center of space, alone again. And somewhere out there, the Val were now asking themselves the question Morrow wanted them to ask: how many more ships like this do the humans have? The darkness of the black line was quiet once more. The enemy was moving away. One by one, the Veil ships shifted into retreat formation. Their sleek hulls turned, and their blue engines flared gently against the dark. The Black Fleet, known for its brutal tactics and fearless strikes, was leaving without a fight. On the command deck of the Aegis Eternal, the crew watched in stunned silence. Commander Jackson Morrow didn't say a word. His hands rested calmly behind his back as his eyes followed the shrinking signals on the main display. The red enemy icons faded into yellow, then vanished from the tactical grid altogether. Lieutenant Kayla Ree finally spoke, voice quiet and clear. They're breaking formation. All ships are moving beyond treaty lines. No pursuit signals, no countermeasures. Lieutenant Mackle Stone leaned back in his chair, letting out a breath he had been holding. They're running. Morrow turned to them both. They're not running. They're retreating. There's a difference. They'll remember this day, and next time, they'll come better prepared. The bridge was still tense, even with the threat gone. No one celebrated. There was no cheering, just relief, and something else: respect for what had just happened. They hadn't fired a real shot. They hadn't destroyed a single ship, but they had won. And the Veil knew it. A new message came through. This one encrypted, direct and private. It came from the Veil flagship, not a public broadcast. Morrow had it transferred to his station. He read it silently. "We will remember this encounter. Next time, there will be no warnings. Enjoy your illusion of safety." He stared at the message for a moment, then closed it without replying. Threats were easy to send after retreat. He turned back to the crew. "Begin scanning the area for wreckage. If any trace of our missing science ships is still out there, I want it logged." "Aye, sir," Ree said, already tapping the search commands. The Aegis Eternal moved forward slowly, no longer cloaked but still shielded. As it passed through the former battle zone, only silence remained. There were no bodies, no broken hulls, no sign of the lost Terran ships. "Either the Veil destroyed everything clean," Stone said, "or they never left a trace to begin with." Morrow frowned. "Or someone else did it, and they just used the excuse to respond." He didn't trust Korath Veil. The Veil Admiral had shown one thing clearly: fear, and fear could be useful, but it also made enemies more dangerous. "Log this incident," Morrow said. "Include full records of Veil fleet positions, message transcripts, power traces, everything. We're going to need it." Ree looked up. "Do you think they'll attack again soon?" "No," Morrow said. "They'll go home and think. They'll analyze every second of this encounter. They'll wonder if this ship is a one-of-a-kind, or the first of many." Stone nodded. "We just became a legend." Morrow didn't smile. He didn't feel like a legend. He looked around at his crew, men and women who had stood calm under pressure, who hadn't fired out of fear, who had trusted his judgment even with death closing in. They had done what no Terran ship had ever done, stared down the Black Fleet, and survived without a shot fired in anger. And the Aegis Eternal had shown its teeth. Just enough. "Signal High Command," Morrow ordered. "Mission complete. No hostile engagement. No casualties." He paused. "But recommend full strategic alert. The Veil have seen what we carry now. They won't forget it." "Message ready," Ree confirmed. "Transmitting." Morrow walked toward the viewport and looked into the dark once more. Behind them the Black Fleet had vanished. In front of them was the long flight home, but something had changed out here in the void. A line had been crossed, not the Black Line, but a deeper one, the line between peace and fear. A ship had changed the balance, and Commander Morrow knew it wouldn't end here. He turned back toward his chair. Set course for home. Full stealth, quiet engines. The crew moved quickly. The Aegis Eternal turned gently, fading once more into the shadows. As it disappeared into the dark, the galaxy was left to wonder, how many more ships like this did the Terrans build? The Aegis Eternal moved through space like a shadow returning to the night. Its engines ran quiet, the hull cloaked once again in the ship's advanced stealth field. From the outside it was gone, vanished into the void, as though it had never been there at all. But the galaxy would remember. Inside the ship, the crew was quiet. Not out of fear anymore, but out of reflection. What they had just experienced would change everything. No one said it aloud, but they all knew it. They hadn't just completed a mission, they had sent a message. Commander Jackson Morrow sat in his chair on the command deck, arms resting on the armrests, eyes staring ahead at the dark screen showing empty space. He looked calm, but his mind was still processing every second of the confrontation. The Veil had been stopped, not with violence, but with presence, with power, with restraint, and that he knew would echo louder than 1,000 warships. Lieutenant Kayla Ray approached, a datapad in hand. Final scans complete. No wreckage, no debris, not a trace of the lost research vessels. Morrow took the pad and glanced through the report. They were erased clean. Whether by the Veil or someone else, we won't know. But the message was clear. They don't want humans in the Black Line, Ree said. Morrow nodded. And now they'll think twice about testing us again. Across the deck, Mari Stone stood with arms crossed. They'll come back, sooner or later. Maybe not here, maybe not with Korath, but they won't let this go. They'll come differently. Morrow said. Next time they'll be smarter, quieter, but maybe more cautious. He rose from his chair and walked to the central holotable. A map of known space was projected there. Terran space glowing blue, Veil territory glowing red. Between them the black line shimmered like a scar. Every time peace holds, it's not because of trust, he said softly. It's because someone decided not to push harder. Ree looked up. And today that was them. No, Morrow corrected gently. Today, it was us. The room was quiet for a long moment. Then a soft chime came from the comms station. Incoming encrypted message, the comms officer reported. From Terran High Command. Route it through, Morrow said. The message was brief. Mission acknowledged. No retaliation ordered. Strategic alert level raised across all outer colonies. Await further instruction. He listened to the words, then gave a small nod. As expected, the Republic would not escalate. Not yet, but they would be watching. The crew slowly returned to routine. Systems were powered down. Maintenance cycles began. Ship operations settled into the normal rhythm of space travel. But nothing about this mission had been normal. In the mess hall, crew members spoke in hushed tones. Some replayed the footage of the Veil ships retreating. Others looked at the readouts of the Aegis Eternal's reactor core, still struggling to believe its raw power. For most of them, this had been their first time facing the threat of death without a single shot fired. They had stood on the edge of war and pulled back from it. Commander Morrow stood alone in his quarters now, looking out at the stars. He thought of the lives lost, those on the research ships who had vanished without reason. He thought of the Veil commander, Korath Veil, whose retreat had not been weakness, but calculation. He would return one day, Morrow was certain, but next time he might bring more than words. And he thought of his crew, ordinary people who had faced fear, followed orders, and stood firm when it counted. He picked up his mission report and added a final line at the end. Peace held. For now, let this be remembered, not as a battle won but a war delayed. He closed the file and sent it outside. The Aegis Eternal continued on its silent journey home. It was unseen, but not unknown. Somewhere across the stars, the Veil would be preparing. The galaxy had changed. A new balance had been formed, not by destruction, but by the presence of something more powerful than fear, control. And as long as the Aegis Eternal sailed the void, the Terran Republic would never again be underestimated.